right, welcome back, everybody. We're so glad to be back with you for another week of discipleship and a discussion about how you can change the way you do discipleship at your church. But when we left last week, we issued you a challenge. Jim and I asked you to take somebody out to coffee. I hope that those experiences were formative for you. I hope that you really stuck to the script of not having an agenda and just trying to get to know somebody, because relationship is the foundation of discipleship. And you think about the way Jesus did what he did with his disciples. He spoke to them from a place of relationship, not a place, even though he had the authority, he spoke to them from a place where he knew them and he knew what their needs were. And so we as the church, we as disciple makers, we need to do the same thing for people who are going to be leading deeper into their relationship with God. And so we also talked a little bit last week about what it looks like to win. And hopefully that was a really formative discussion in the way that you thought about making disciples this week. But we got brand new content for this week. So Jim, why don't you tell us a little bit about what we're going to learn today?
Today we're going to try to get on the same page, and that is to define what is a disciple. If Michael Dell from Dell Computers called all of his employees together and said, "What do we do here?" What do you think they would say? I think they would say we make computers, right? If you called our congregations together from all of our Methodist churches and said, "What are we doing here?" We'd get a lot of different answers. Some would read the definition of what we do out of the discipline and say we're called to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world, which is a good answer. The question is that your definition for making disciples? Tonight, chapter 2 is going to look at a definition from Matthew 4:19. And this is the definition we're going to try to get you to use. A disciple is someone who has been called to follow Jesus, someone who's being changed by Jesus, and someone who has a purpose in their life. To put it in the Bible terms, it's being fishers of men. It's very similar to what Bishop Fairley talked about some months ago when in all of the conferences that he held around our Kentucky Annual Conference, he talked about making passionate spiritual disciples.
That's right. That's
and
right.
It's someone who knows Jesus, who's growing in Jesus, and who's showing Jesus.
That's right.
So that's what we want to talk about tonight. I think it's going to be a really exciting study. This centers around head, heart, and hands.
Yep.
And so the whole session, Drew, is about Jesus in your head, Jesus in your heart, and Jesus in your hands. And there's one particular page I want you to pay close attention to. That's page 40, because that's to identify where you are. Where are you in your head, in your heart, and in your hands? So hopefully we'll dig a little deeper this week and really focus on where you are in relationship to being a disciple who makes disciples.
That's right. This is really formative content for what you're going to have to do from here. And it's going to take some honesty. I mean, it's not an easy thing to sit down and write down on the page who you are and how you've been doing at this. I think if all of us are really honest, we all start from a place where we're really heavy in the head because it's the easiest, right, Jim? Yep. I mean, we can study our Bibles and we can dig into all of the doctrine and the theology of the church. But when we start thinking about what we're supposed to feel about it and what we're supposed to do about it, that's when the rubber meets the road, and that's what we're challenging you to do tonight. So in your discussions, make sure you spend some time on that, but then also take a few minutes maybe to share stories about who you took out to coffee or how that whole thing went. Maybe it was a complete disaster and you need some prayer. Maybe it was awesome and God did something really special. We want to hear those glory sightings. So dig into your discussion, and when you're all finished with that, come back to us. All right, everybody, so we hope that your discussion tonight was really formative for you and really helpful for you. We want to wrap it up a little bit for you and give you some take-homes. But before that, I've asked Jim to tell a story. And it's a story about how he came to know a guy that we know together now named Mark Danzy and what impact that had on his life. So would you share with them your meeting of Mark?
Sure, I'd be glad to. Mark Danzy is the discipleship pastor at Mount Pisgah United Methodist Church in Johns Creek, Georgia. And several years ago, I attended a conference and he led it. And shortly after that, at my local church, I was on the staff at Emmanuel at the time. I was given the responsibility to be the discipleship pastor. And I didn't know what I was doing. So my senior pastor, Kelly McClendon, asked that I called Mark and find out what book I was supposed to read so I could really become the discipleship pastor. And I called Mark and I asked him about, what's that book I'm supposed to read, the curriculum I'm supposed to study to be the discipleship guru. And he said, let me ask you one question. Tell me the names of the people that you're currently discipling at your church.
So good.
Drew, I told him, I preach sometime, and I think I'm pretty good, and I teach some classes, and I get people to join the church, and he interrupted me, and he said, no, tell me the names of the men that you're currently discipling in your local church. 0. I couldn't name a single person that I was pouring my life into. And he said, that's the problem. You don't know how to disciple people. So I need to disciple you, and then you'll know how to disciple someone else. And that's where it all began.
That's awesome. And what's really cool about this story, and the reason I wanted him to share it, is because Mark had that conversation with Jim then had that conversation with me, and was very intentional in my life and in the formative time that we had together when we first met to say, discipleship is relationship. It's getting to know one another. Who are the men you're discipling? And so if you ask me that question now, I can answer that question. I can give you the names of the guys. Jim can do the same thing. Absolutely. Because we realize how important it is to place a face with what we're doing. It's not just doing ministry, we're making disciples. And so the challenge we kind of came up with for you all to do this week is to think about that. Are you doing ministry, or are you making disciples? And so what I want you to do this week is I want you to read that verse we read together last week, Matthew 28, 18 through 20. And I want you to read it every night this week. And in your time of prayer about that verse, I want you to ask yourself that question honestly. We've done some deep digging tonight. Ask yourself, am I doing ministry, or am I making disciples? Am I following the Great Commission that Jesus has given me? Am I being intentional about it? And be honest with yourself about it. And again, we're not going to hold it against you. Both of us have answered that question at one time or another, and both of us have answered it wrong at one time or another too. So we're not going to hold it against you. We just want to start you on the right spot. And so spend some time doing that this week. Anything else you want to share with him about this chapter before we wrap it up?
No, I think that's it. This is really formative, and as Drew said, it's important. And we hope you're getting it. If you're still struggling, don't give up. Keep trying. We're patient. God's patient. So we're glad that you're with us.
Awesome. We'll see you next time.